Imagine being told to pack and leave your home within the hour. Now imagine that happening 3, 5, 10 times. Hiding with your loved ones in a tent, only to be targeted in the very place they said you would be safe. Just imagine. I'm Anelise Borges, and this is The Stream. Since October last year, 90% of Gaza's population has been displaced at least once. Tens of thousands of men, women, children, and the elderly have been on the move, seeking shelter and safety day in and day out over the past 10 months, only to be met by more death and destruction. From Gaza City in the north to Deir al-Balah in the center to Khan Yunis and Rafah in the south and then back again, it is the largest displacement of Palestinians in over 75 years. You want to know what it looks like? Here it is.
تبين اخلاء البلد القديمه واحنا حرفيا قاعدين نخلي على حظي يا الله زود فاضي. طيب بابا على الوحده الناس قاعده تطلع واحنا كمان كله. احنا على فكره طالعين ومش عارفين احنا وين نروح. فيش بالمره ما فيش اصلا ما فيش مكان. اصلا فيش مكان يا عمي فيش مكان. كله بيمسح قاعد. بسم الله يلا. عارفين وين نروح؟ يا رب قعدنا لأنه مش عارفين صراحة وين نروح، بس عدينا الخطر يعني.
يا ربي يفرجها علينا يا رب. وين نروح؟ وين نيجي؟ مش عارفين. هينا في الشارع قاعدين يا ربي.
Now, joining us to discuss what many Palestinians are saying is the continuation of Nakba. Our student turned emergency responder and nurse Ahmed Kouta and PhD candidate in history and Middle Eastern studies in Harvard University, Hanna Alshaikh. Thank you both so much for being part of the stream today. It's a pleasure to have you. Ahmed, let me start with you. Let me get your reaction to what we just saw. But also, if you could share with us some of what you experienced in Gaza. I mean, you were among the millions of people on the move every day. What does it look like on the ground? Can you help us understand?
Yes, hello. Thank you for having me today, join you on this stream in order to share some experiences and answer these questions. The small clip that we've just seen is the life that has been hit people in Gaza for the past 10 months. Evacuation is something, one of the worst things that can be happening, not from the unsafetyness, rather from the stress that people are in, because once a place is ordered to evacuate, it's people are evacuating in different ways. They're either ordered to evacuate or they're either evacuating because their home has been targeted or their area is unsafe due to excessive bombing. Mm-hmm. Or the IOF have invaded that specific area. So the way people are evacuating, they really take whatever they have. Each person in Gaza, this is a protocol for wars. They have a small bag they take on their back, and this is called the evacuation bag. It would have a pair of clothes, a pair of underclothes, and then any important papers. So people would look for this bag, try and grab it, and run as fast as they can in order to reach places that are safe. It happened with me not just once, but plenty of times. I was displaced in Gaza. I had to evacuate each place I was in about 9 to 11 different times to different places in the northern part of Gaza. And each time you evacuate, you're in a river of people going in different situations. People are getting lost from families. Everybody is very scared because they don't know what, even like while you're evacuating, you can be shot or bombed in the way. And those were things that we were continuously living and seeing. The way old people are being dragged on wheelchairs, the way infants are being held, the way people are walking bare feet. In the cold winter, people are running with bare feet, with hardly any clothes on. And right now, in the very midst of the summer, people again, it's very difficult because they don't have any other ways of evacuating other than walking in the dust, in the sand, in the heat. The cars, the transportations are very difficult for people to be evacuating with. We can be talking a lot about the way people are evacuating. I just don't want to take enough time, so
No,
feel free to tell me there.
as you're describing what you experienced, we're seeing some pictures here, and it is absolutely heartbreaking because, as you said, it is children, the elderly, vulnerable people, obviously, that are on the move without knowing what's going to happen to them, without knowing where they're going to find safety, and of course, all the while they're being bombed and shot at. So it is absolutely horrendous. I mean, Hanna, as we said in the start, 9 out of 10 people in Gaza have been displaced so far, at least once in this war. That takes an enormous toll, obviously, not only physically in the body because you're under a lot of stress, but also mentally. Would you say that this is, I don't know, part of the plan? Is this part of Israel's intent here?
First, thank you for having me, Anelise. And to answer your question, absolutely. This massive upheaval is not an unintended consequence, and it's not an accident. It's a calculated element of Israel's war strategy here. It's designed to break the spirit of people and to create such an environment of chaos that masks its war crimes and its massacres. It's designed to create a system of desperation and chaos by constantly uprooting families. It's looking to strike fear into the hearts of Palestinians and to make it harder to document atrocities held against them. It's a form of psychological warfare that is central to the establishment of the State of Israel. It has plenty of historical precedent. In the 1948 war that we talk about as the beginning of the Nakba, in which the State of Israel was established, it used the same exact tactics. The military technology might have been different, but the goals were the same. It was maximum land, minimum Palestinians. And it used the same kinds of violence that we see playing out in Gaza. As I'm listening to Ahmed speaking, and as I'm looking at this footage, I'm reminded of scenes, not only of the stories of elders, from my family or from other members of, the Palestinian community that I know, but it's also in our literature. It's also in our film. When you think of a novel like Ghassan Kanafani's Returning to Haifa, or it's a novella, I should say, the similar scenes are depicted there. The sea of people, or a river of people, as Ahmed had described. And so this is Netanyahu's strategy right now as well. What he's looking for is to, as he calls it, thin out the Palestinian population of Gaza. And he tasked his Minister of Strategic Affairs, Ron Dermer, with precisely this goal. It's not a secret. So there are two goals here, really. What we're seeing is a way to force Palestinians to demand to flee their land, first of all, and second of all, to create the conditions to eventually resettle and reoccupy the Gaza Strip. So they want to clear out Palestinians from the land. If they kill as many Palestinians as possible, that's fine with them. And the idea is to reconquer that territory. So we see cycles repeating over and over again over the decades.
It's, again, heartbreaking, and as you're describing, historical, which is even perhaps more frustrating for the people, because as you said, everybody has references of this happening in the past. While researching for this particular show, we came across several people in Gaza who have been sharing their experiences of forced displacement online. Take a look.
My family and I have been displaced from our home 5 times now. I'm living in a tent. This is my tent that I share with my family.
You may ask me why we don't put glasses in the window. Actually, because we fear an explosion. My mom's put the tables. She thinks that when we put our heads under this table, she protects us.
Let me take you to my daily routine before I sleep. It's now 10 p.m. I collect my stuff to my bag in case we need to evacuate as fast as we can if there was bombing around us or on us during the night hours. We bought the shoes near to the door so we do not leave anyone behind.
Ahmed, I imagine that these scenes are too familiar, actually, for you, having just come out of Gaza. But I wanted to ask you a little bit about hospitals. I mean, you volunteered as a nurse, and evacuating hospitals is a whole different story. You can't really move patients around. Many people get left behind. Can you tell us what you saw?
I remember at the very beginning when we were in the Shifa hospital, it had around 100,000 people displaced in it. A day overnight, 30,000 people left the southern part of Gaza in early November. I remember on the 10th of November when the IOF invaded the Shifa hospital early that morning, overnight there were 4 attacks on the hospital, and these 4 attacks, they meant that the hospital is a dangerous place now and you have to evacuate. The hospital being a dangerous place left from I remember I was standing outside and I had a very emotional moment seeing the hospital empty out on you. People, 70,000 people to 5,000 people, all these 65,000 people almost leaving the hospital, going to the south or going to different places. As I said, it was a river of people that were leaving all different streets, all different ways. And it was a really emotional moment, because when people are around you, you feel somewhat less stress, or like somewhat you feel less, you feel like you're accompanied with people around you. So whatever happens to everyone, it's gonna just be merciful that it's happening to everybody all together. When you see all these people leaving, it gets very emotional. Now the way people are leaving, I remember that day there was a girl. She was a little bit, maybe she was a little bit of her early 20s, so more of a female or an adult. And her brother was killed, and he was in the garden of the Shifa hospital. And she was asking people were just running, and he was in the garden, and she was saying, "Somebody please help me bury him, and then I can go and run away to the south." And people were telling her, right now it's not the moment to be thinking of someone that's dead. You just have to run away for your life. It's very hard to, again, go and imagine it, because it didn't happen just to one hospital. It happened to all the hospitals in Gaza have been
and it's again, it's beyond complex. It's a very difficult operation, and we've heard the testimonies of several doctors saying that they were not going to leave, they were going to stay next to their patients because they could not unplug the patients from machines. And that indeed is another very dark chapter in this war. Hanna, I want to talk to you about the timeline here. I mean, back in May, evacuation orders across the Strip meant that 900,000 people were on the move in just 1 week. The Israeli army then took over Rafah and pushed civilians to the 16-kilometer-long strip of Al-Mawasi, which had been labeled permanent safe zone until this. Israel attacked Al-Mawasi with 2,000-pound bombs designed to bust bunkers in Afghanistan. These bombs were dropped in tents. You're a historian. Are you able to draw comparisons between this and any other moment in history?
We saw roots of this in all of Israel's wars on Palestinians and on Palestine throughout its history. What differs now is a matter of scale. It's undeniable. The matter of scale is beyond the human imagination. And we have to remember something. Essentially, the Gaza Strip is this home to refugees and refugee camps. And the refugee camp is always thought of as the beating heart of 2 things: Palestinian resistance, which takes many forms, and Palestinian steadfastness, which we call sumud in Arabic. And when Israel attacks a refugee camp, it's assaulting not only Palestinians and their lives and their existence, but there's something symbolic there. And when all of the Gaza Strip is rendered, again, to supposedly a refugee camp, to a safe zone, to a site of refuge, Israel is making clear that its issue was always with Palestinian refugees and with the Palestinian cause and the Palestinian question, and Palestinian rights and the right of return. And we see that at play when the state of Israel is ordering Palestinians to flee to safe zones and then shoots them along the path. This certainly has its roots historically. There are many cases, let's say in the wars of 1948 and 1967, where Israel issued marching orders and Palestinians were forced to flee on foot. And so much of what Ahmed had mentioned in the last segment about the utter chaos and about the elderly and about all of this movement was at play then too. Situations in which people were ordered to march to a certain area and then told to go back and then shot upon return. We've seen footage and video after video of tanks shooting at cars driving along designated safe routes during this war. Because we're talking about hospitals, There's been recent reporting about something that is being called Gaza's miscarriage nightmare, that a single doctor notes that he sees about 4 to 5 cases of miscarriages a day. And many of the cases that he has reported come from pregnant mothers who were shot at by usually predator drones while fleeing. And of course, these sorts of stories also have roots in Israel's wars as well. So absolutely. But what we do see right now is a matter of scale.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of this constant shelling of so-called safe zones, here's what Jihad saw.
I was at Al-Mawasi market in Khan Yunis, the so-called safe zone in Gaza. Safe? Let me show you our safety. Walking past a refugee camp, I saw mothers holding their children, tight, fear in every eye. Just 50 meters past, my world shattered. A sound that pierced my soul, a missile, an explosion, time froze. I ran. We all ran, another missile and another 5 times. Death fell from the sky. If I had been a minute later, I would have joined the victims. The camp I just passed, obliterated. After an eternity of 10 seconds, I turned back, my hands shaking, filmed, chaos everywhere, a father crying his bloody daughter, bodies on the ground, the wounded crying for help, each face a mirror of my own terror. This is our truth. There is no safe place in Gaza.
Hanna, you talked about the scale of the humanitarian crisis that is unfolding in Gaza is also unprecedented. I mean, there were different estimates circulating in terms of how long the health system in Gaza would be able to operate, how much longer food was going to last without aid coming in. We have passed all the worst predictions, and people are still stuck there, enduring some horrific situations. I mean, in your opinion, how's that possible, and how much longer will the people of Gaza be able to actually carry on?
It's remarkable, the steadfastness of the people of Gaza who've been abandoned by the world. And even when gestures are made, they do not come close enough. When Israel is able to attack hospitals and normalize these attacks, when Israel is able to target a place whose population is primarily children without so much of a dollar being withheld in foreign aid in response, is astonishing. But we have to also remember that there was a long history of suffering in Gaza that actually predates this war itself, that predates October 2023, and it predates the ongoing genocide. The Gaza Strip was deemed to be headed towards an unlivable state around 2012, and they estimated that by 2020, the Strip would be unlivable. And still people persisted and they persevered. But what's happening now is extremely threatening to lives. While people are pushing forward, they're demanding to stay on their land, especially when we talk about North Gaza. When people stay in North Gaza, they're refusing. They're refusing this world order that has not only turned its back on them, but is also blaming them for their own deaths. We know that there's a will and there's fierce determination to stay, but just because there's this fierce determination does not mean that the world should let itself off the hook. There needs to be real accountability. There needs to be real policy change. There needs to be an arms embargo. There's a spread of disease, the reintroduction of polio into the population, the dimensions of the humanitarian catastrophe are simply endless. And so something has to change.
You mentioned polio. There are several viruses actually spreading across these overcrowded camps. Ahmed, can you share with us what you're hearing from people on the ground, from your colleagues from the hospital in terms of these diseases that are spreading?
It's not just the polio virus that has recently been established. From the very beginning, patients or people with diseases, normal diseases, they aren't able to have any treatment. And a lot of these diseases are easily able to spread. Very beginning in the wintertime, when somebody is sick, they can't even have a vaccine or any type of medication. So that spreads to everybody in the family. That was the very beginning. Later on, hepatitis has hit in. A lot of people in the southern part, it hit them first because of the pressure of the people in the camps. It's as every camp beside it is another camp. You've seen all the photos on social media. So imagine all these people in a camp, they're using one washroom. Imagine all these people, like
Absolutely.
whoever uses water, it's like going in between all the tents, and like people or young kids are playing with it, or like they're stepping on it, and then they're back in the tent, and then it spreads very easily. So a lot of diseases with so many different symptoms have been spread. And recently with the heat, there's a lot of people that they're not being hygienated. They're not being able to be clean at all, because the water and the shampoo and soap and all these hygiene products, they're not available. So a lot of people are getting some sort of pimples and rashes
and scabies and all kinds of skin conditions. Yeah, again, horrific conditions, horrific living conditions, almost, again, unlivable, as Hanna just described. We've been talking for 10 months now, and that is why it's so frustrating to continue insisting on this. But I want your take. I mean, we talked about the West double standards. We know injustice is universal and the world's silence is deafening. So, Ahmed, I would like to hear from you today. Do you have a message to the world about what you saw in Gaza and what needs to happen?
I used to have a message before the 7th of October of living in peace and having justice. But now the message has completely changed because the people of Gaza have the right to live life like every person around the world. People in Gaza before the 7th of October, actually, they weren't living the best life. As Hanna said, by 2020, the strip won't be able to be livable. However, the people of Gaza, with their resistance and with their love to life, they've made a lot of new places. And we've seen how beautiful Gaza was before the 7th of October. But economically, the situation in Gaza wasn't the best. The core message that I hope reaches the world, or the world can implement something on it, is the right of people of Gaza having just basic rights of living. But the first thing right now is we really need a ceasefire. We don't want to talk about the third, fourth, fifth step of justice. We're talking about just the bare minimum of having a ceasefire and not watching continuous massacres, because each time you see the news, each time you watch a massacre, each time somebody from Gaza sends you something, people around the world, it seems to them a normal number.
Again, sorry to interrupt you. Again, what you're asking is indeed very basic, a ceasefire, and for people to be able to live their lives. Hanna, I would like a final message from you. Do you have a message to the world right now in terms of what should happen in Gaza?
I do, but first I would like to outline the stakes a little bit, because the way that I see it, we have a choice. We either allow Israel to continue to exceptionalize itself, vilify Palestinians, justify genocide, or we accept that it's time to overcome the decades of anti-Palestinian hatred and propaganda and bigotry, and recognize that this battle has universal consequences. Because what's at stake here is not just about this tiny territory that's beloved to so many of us, that deserves a ceasefire, it deserves reconstruction, it deserves justice for everybody that's been killed in this genocide. And we also should recognize that this little place on earth is changing the world order. And we have to think about this. Are we going to live in a world where it is absolutely normal and just business as usual when hospitals are bombed, when doctors are rounded up and arrested, when children are killed in airstrikes, when UN officials and international humanitarian aid workers are killed, when journalists are targeted, assassinated, and then blamed for their own deaths? The struggle is universal, whether or not it's convenient. So Gaza is really the last moment here where we can decide what norms are going to become acceptable in future conflict. And so I'd also like to sort of reflect on the theme of today, of our discussion. It was displacement. Most people in Gaza have been displaced, as you've mentioned, and Gaza is this place where 2/3 of its population are the descendants of refugees that were displaced from other parts of historic Palestine. But displacement defines the territory, and displacement defines all of the Palestine question. And it always does. And it connects all Palestinians, whether or not this displacement has touched their families, and whether or not they share in that immediate pain as it has affected their family. You still share in it as a Palestinian. So if I may, I would like to conclude with a few words from the late Fayez Sayegh, a Palestinian intellectual who died in 1980, and who in 1959 organized Palestinians to stop a proposed resettlement plan. It was called the Hammarskjöld Plan. And he said, there is no solution to the question of Palestine except the return of refugees to Palestine and the return of Palestine to them. And this is how I think about Gaza right now.
Hanna, Ahmed, thank you both so much for being part of the stream today. It's been great having this conversation. And thank you all for watching. Please do stay in touch with us on social media. You can use the hashtag or the handle AJStream to send us your questions and suggestions. We promise we'll look into them. Take care, and I'll see you soon.